And now it's time again for another episode of An N of One, where we explore the individual stories of applied behavioral scientists, how they get into the field, and where they think it's going. In life, an N of one doesn't mean a lot. We look at large population data, but in reality, an N of one tells us a lot. Storytelling tells us a lot. And I'm here today with my friend Reshma from India, who I love, and so good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good, and this is so good to talk to you again. How's Bear?
Bear, my son, is great. He's 9. He's huge. He's very into anime right now. So we just took him to his first anime con this weekend, all dressed up. He was very happy about that. How is your lovely, inquisitive kiddo, who is definitely the future of behavioral science? She has a lot of curious questions for the world.
Yeah, she's good. She has exams, so I've been really stressed. She's not, but yeah, sure.
Isn't that how that works, right? She's not worried, but you are. Were you?
Yeah, that seems.
Let's go back to actually like you at that age. Did you have the same level of sort of curiosity that she did? Were you that sort of curious, questioning kid?
So okay, if I were to contrast Ari, my daughter Ari and me, no, we are so different. Ari is more like her father. She's actually entirely like her father. She's taken absolutely nothing from me. I was just boarding and lodging, and all the genes have just come from somewhere else. But yeah, so she's so that's the weird part, and I think that's how you know that you just don't know how life's going to turn out, because Ari is inquisitive. Ari asks all sorts of weird questions, and as a kid, that's not how I was. I didn't know any of the answers, and I had just had tons of questions, but I preferred to just make up answers in my head and not know if any of those answers were correct. And Sort of just figure out on the go if no, that's not right. Oh, that's not what it is. Okay, all right, let's go. Um, I I grew up in different countries, sometimes with sometimes my parents in India, sometimes with my parents in Dubai, and then in Bahrain, and a bunch of different places. And I think each time I joined a new school, um, the the kids got different. It was weird. Like, you imagine that kids are the same everywhere, but they weren't. The kids in Dubai were not like the kids in Bahrain. Was certainly not like the kids in India. And So each time I was like, oh, maybe these guys are like this. And then I'd go and be like, nope, no, that's wrong. No, that's not what it is. Maybe if I do this, then um maybe this is humor. And no, it's not. This is not funny. So it was sort of trial and error to just human in different places. And Yeah, Ari wouldn't do that. Ari wouldn't do that.
What do you think? What is the contrast? What do you think Ari would do? Now I'm curious.
um, I think Ari has a set idea so far right now. So she sort of knows that, oh, if I want to make friends, so I can just tag some. We can start with running, and so we'll start with running around, and you catch me, I'll catch you, or I have this toy, and let's just start. So she start with a beginning point. She'd start with something that she knows the both of them will sort of get, and then go from there. And I didn't have that skill. Yeah, I don't think I'd tag anyone and ask them to run now either. But Yeah, so she started like that, but that's not something that came to me naturally at all. I just have to sort of just go in cold and like, who is this? And why is this? And sort of then figure my way around. And I always did that. I was always that kid. But yeah.
So she's starting from the basics and moving forward, and you're starting at the end and moving backwards. I wonder if anybody
I
read
don't
the
know
book.
if that's the end. I feel like this was so fundamentally like I was Yeah, I think Ari's got it right. God bless her. Thank God. Like she's got it right, and I was just like figuring, how do I make myself like, if there's a group, if this is the group of five of us, what am I doing over here, and what are the other four? And I just had all of these things that I had to figure out first, and then sort of, yeah, it was weird. Now when I
That's
think of it, but
We like weird on this podcast, and we like weird in behavioral science. If I had asked, like, 10-year-old Reshma what she wanted to be, what would she have said? Like, was there a career path that was sort of in your mind as like Reshma the astronaut? Like, where were you going?
I was sure I was going to be a writer.
Like a
Actually, I was
fiction writer?
always sure that, um, yeah, I think so. I think so. But when I think now of, yeah, I'd say fiction, because it's not like I didn't know fact from anything else. I mean, it's not like it's, who knew? So, yeah, so fiction. But um, I think the reason that I wanted to write was, writing was more thinking than writing. It was more thinking than, I know writing is expression, and today I do write to express. But I think back then writing was thinking, and so even stories, or even thoughts, or any piece that I was writing, was just always just helping me process. And I I guess I didn't know um, that that's not what writers, what people generally read. So I was like, oh, I write, so maybe that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna grow up and be a writer. Um, After I started writing, at some point, this is the weirdest part, right? So for a long time, even when I was a kid, when I started reading stories, um, I think I think they're trying to process something. They're thinking something, and the story is a way to process that. Like there's a, how do I explain it? Yeah. Um, it felt like they were trying to talk about, let's say, excitement. And if they were trying to talk about excitement, then a story that um, a story that was about an excited kid that ran into a wall, or any of those things, they were all like, it was all like, oh, that's what it's like to be excited, and that's what they're saying. And then I tried to imitate that when I was writing, because we're like, oh, okay. And I think that's how I started writing stories.
Mm. And did this, I mean, you still write, and you actually, were a copywriter. We're not going to skip ahead to that, but
Yes,
we are
I
going to get to
was.
it.
I was, yes.
Right. So this has sort of been a lasting theme, but you didn't go and get a degree in English, right? It isn't like you
No.
went and said, okay, I'm going to go like down what we might think of as a more traditional writer's path. How did you end up in a BFA?
Yes. So there were a bunch of things that I did before that. I've done a ton of things before I'm here, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. I mean, I don't know. I might just do something else after this, because that's just been the theme of life. Um, so I my first job, the first thing that I ever did was, I worked in a call center. Yes.
Wait, was this prior to the BFA? Was this prior to the design degree?
This is prior to the BFA, yes.
Okay, all right.
So
So
as in, I
so
just started.
so Reshma comes out of the equivalent of high school and goes to work in a call center.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. Exactly what I started. I mean, I was I was like, so I got out of college. College is, no, it was more what's called pre-university here. So it was 12th grade, and I got out of 12th grade, and I knew, I had an aunt who was in advertising, and she was a copywriter, and in Bahrain. And there were times when I'd switch on the TV, and there'd be these jingles for these ads, and I know that my aunt had written it. So it was just, I'd keep singing, I'd keep humming those, and I was like, I knew when I grew up I want to do this. And this was something on the side, but I had no idea it was advertising. It was jingles that were on TV. Um, I I I came to know at some point that there was this particular there was this college of fine arts in Bangalore, and she had attended it. So I was like, I'm gonna go to this college, but I'm a South Indian, and you don't go to art college. You do engineering, or you do medical science. That's what you're supposed to do. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do either of those. Uh, I want to go to this college. And trust me, I didn't even know it was fine arts. I had no idea. I was just like, that college, I know the address, but I don't know what they do. And she came out and she wrote jingles. That's all I knew about it. And but so I wrote the exam to get into engineering because that's what you're supposed to do. And I got into this college in Bangalore to do architecture. And I was like, okay, so we'll do that. But it was so weird because on the way to this college, on the way to the architecture college, I actually passed by the fine arts college. And I'm like, wait, that's where I was supposed to be. That's what I wanted to do. And I was in a rickshaw and my dad was with me. And I'm like, can we hold on a bit? Can we like just hold on? And I went in, and you're not going to believe this. There was actually an entrance exam for like 3 days, and it was 2 days. There was 2 days for an entrance exam at the Fine Arts College, I think. And I'm like, on the way back, I just want to go here. And I was like, yeah, sure, okay. And we
Wait, did
came
he
back, and I wrote the entrance.
wait, did he know that you wanted to go for the entrance exam, or he thought you just
No,
wanted to
he
have
had
an
no clue. He had no clue. It was like an entrance exam, but because it was an art college, there were always these fairs, and there were always these there were always these presentations and stuff happening. So it just looked like a lot of people just hanging around at other, I don't know, Bangalore, big city, something's happening. She wants to go, let her go. And I went and I wrote the entrance exam and I came back. And
so you applied in
and then I heard
secret
from them and they
to
said,
the art college?
yeah, it's like I like he's not gonna know. He's not gonna know. So, I just
He
went there,
just,
wrote and
he,
came back.
he just won't notice that you've gone to a different college than you
That's
said that you were
coming.
going
I'm just
to.
coming. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just think it through, man. I don't go through life thinking about shit. I just like go into it. Okay. And so I went and I got in. And I came back and then I heard from them and they said you're selected and you can get in. And I'm like, what? Really? Um, and then I had to tell my father now because I was supposed to otherwise join the engineering college. And and then he said, "There's no way. There's no way. I'm not paying for art school. There's no chance. I'm not paying for art school." And I said, "Okay. So clearly the problem here is the payment. But can I go to art school?" And he he didn't know what to say about it. But he said no and all that stuff, and he was very upset. Um, so I came to Bangalore, and the first thing that I did was that I looked around. There used to be this midday paper that came out, and it said that there were openings for a call center in the place. So college was going to start in, I think, 10 days or 2 weeks or something. And so I joined an art. So again. I didn't think it through. A call center means you're going to have to work through the night, and college means you have to come to college at like by 7:45 or 8 in the morning. And again, I didn't think it through. I said, I'm going. I went for that. They said, sure, join. And I joined immediately. So I knew I was going to get some money at the end of the month. And that meant I could pay rent and I could stay here and do all of that stuff. And yeah, so I joined a call center first, and then came BFA, and then fine arts. And then I sort of did that together. Um, and that worked somehow. I don't know how now. I have no clue how. And I
How,
think that is the answer to why I joined an art college and then became a copywriter. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I never had time for my assignments, so all my art was type focused because it's
you're like, this is
easier
the
and quicker to
fastest
finish.
thing I can do. This is the shortest thing that takes the least amount of time is copywriting.
Exactly.
So you learned to work on a
Yes, 5 years
deadline
of that.
real early.
Yes. But you learn so much from that. And art school has got all sorts of weird. I had a friend. I remember there was one of these things where again no time, and it was applied art. I took up applied art, and so we had to figure. We had to make an ad in. Um, we had 5 days. He did nothing for 5 days, and at the end of it, because there was no time whatsoever, he just took a black artboard and he pasted vinyl that said "Save Electricity." And I was like, "You ass! I mean, shit, that's clever." It took all of 5 minutes, but yeah. Yeah, it was fun. That was
That is
BFA.
fun. Which was your father speaking to you after you absconded to
He,
Bangalore?
oh no, I did the other South Indian thing right. Like I did one thing wrong, which is I didn't do engineering or medical, but I got the other thing right, which is I started working.
So
And
he
he was
was
like,
okay. He's like, all right,
that's okay. All
thumbs
right.
up,
She's
call
not
center
sleeping.
work.
That's all right. Working.
You're not sleeping, you're working, everything is fine. All right. So you work
Yes.
your way through school. Did you still still have copywriting in your mind? Were you still writing on the side?
I did. I wasn't working in the call center for all the time in BF. It was just a little time. But then very quickly I figured, and I think um this is something people shouldn't do in college. You shouldn't start working because the moment you see the money come in and you're young, right? And you see the money and now suddenly you're like, I'm already an adult. I can already do this, whatever I want. It's my money, right? And so you start I think you start thinking about things before you're really ready for them. So I started copywriting way before, like I was in by the time I was in my second year in advertising, my second year in art, I had already begun working at different agencies. I'd already begun working as a writer, and I was working at two or three different places because after quitting the call center, I was just making rent. So I was just working in a bunch of different places. So I spent 5 years in art school, um, sleeping 3 hours a day, just working multiple jobs. And I mean, all of them were advertising and graphic designing related. And so I thought that was freedom, but it was not. But at the same time, I just learned so much so early that by the time I graduated, I was like, oh my God, this is for noobs. It was like, I know this stuff. I already know this stuff. I know what happens. I know that once you learn this, I know what actually happens with what happens with your ads. This is all of this is just it's just an ideal scenario in college, and that's not what's going to happen. I already knew by the time I'd left, by the time I'd finished. So yeah.
But you said something interesting. You said, I don't think this sounds like a great idea, right? You're like already ready to go into the workplace. You understand how things work. You've got kind of a running start. And yet you said, hey, I don't think kids should work in college. Tell me about the dissonance there, right? If you learned so much from it, if it was good for you and you started running, right after school and that really set you up for success, why do you think kids shouldn't work in school?
Because I haven't stopped since then. I mean, I started when I was 17. I'm 40 and I'm not going to get college again, right? And you already know, and there's a problem with knowing too much, right? And if you don't know, then there's so much to imagine and um there's so much to dream up, and you can fail. But if you just jump into it and you start, and especially you start working, and I know work really is not the way that work used to be back then. um in the year 2000, you know, the way that we went to work, the way that we looked at work is not the way that people look at work today, which is, I mean, good for them. But even though I was working as a copywriter at a bunch of at a bunch of different places, it was not one place ever. It was never just one place when I started out, at least. Um, you didn't come in thinking I'm going to learn. You came in thinking I'm getting paid, and it's not about learning is something I have to do on this side. I need to know and I need to be able to deliver. And you started with that. You didn't start with learning. You started with delivering and learning after, right? It was a different time. It was a different world. And it's barely 23 years, but it's completely different. Um, and once you start and you jump into it and you do what you're doing, that is what teaches you. You don't learn and then figure it out and then know what you're doing. You start backward. You first know, and don't let yourself make mistakes. And it's it's unnecessarily butt clenchy, you know, and yeah, and there's no going back from there. There's really no going back from there. So yeah.
I really, really hope that's the clip from this episode. It's unnecessarily butt clenching. I really hope, editors, that's the one I want. Let's keep that one. That's hysterical. No, but I can see both sides of what you're saying. I hear you. You know, as someone who graduated from college in 3 years and worked every job on, I was a bouncer for the college. I worked tech, like any job I could get. I worked in a lab. Every job I could get on campus, I did. Right. I can understand what you're saying. I can see how it shaped who I am, and also hope that my son doesn't have to do that. I hope he has some campus job, because I think it's good to
Exactly.
have a campus job. I know that it's good to have every single job there is, as you try and pay your way through. But I get that. Um,
Yeah.
but you're not, at this time, applied behavioral science isn't in your vernacular. You're not thinking of yourself as an applied behavioral scientist. You're thinking of yourself
Mm.
very much as a copywriter.
No, I left advertising. Advertising in itself 10 years ago. I'm no longer a copywriter.
No, no. I
Um,
mean when you graduated college. So when you
oh,
come out of, I'm taking you back in time. So you graduate college and you
sorry.
think,
Yes.
I'm a copywriter. I'm going to get a copyright. You're not saying, hey, I'm an applied behavioral scientist now in 2006.
No, I had
Right.
no clue what that was. I had no idea. I didn't know people could behave. Never mind, never mind behavioral science. I had no idea, right? But here's the interesting thing. So I've truly been just too many things at every point. Have you seen this? Have you seen this series called Seven Up? This beautiful
No.
series. I think
Oh
it starts
yes, this
sometimes
is
in the
the longitudinal British series where they've been following the same people
yes,
for 82
yeah.
million
He starts
years.
at 7, he meets them at 14, and then right, and then at 21, and then 28, and he goes on till 63. I think 63 is just released. God bless you. And and you see how he starts with the premise that you're already whoever you are at the age of 7, but you do different things because life's throwing new things at you. So you're doing different things, but from the sort of same tools that you're already sort of set. You've already set by the age of 7. I think that's so true. If I look back, so I worked in a call center. I went back and then I did copywriting. And then for some vague reason, the moment I even before I graduated, I got into theater. And I started writing plays, and I started directing plays, and I started acting in plays. And this was, I don't know. See, I know they sound very different, but in my head they're very similar. The skill sets needed to do each and every one of them, from uh, customer support to copywriting to theater to strategy, branding, research, um, to problem solving. I don't know. They're all the same thing in a way,
No,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, art is an intervention to cause people to
Exactly.
think and feel and do a particular thing for sure. Do you remember how'd you get into theater? Did you see a play and be like, yes, that? Like, did you have a friend? Like, what happened there?
No, I was just a hustler. I was doing, I was writing copy, and then there were a bunch of people who at that time wanted to. They introduced me to somebody who was trying to write, who wanted to do a play, and he wanted someone to write it, and they like no one knew anything about it. It was just just this bunch of knuckleheads just put together, and they just said, "Oh, she writes. She does something. She gets paid for writing." So they were like, "Can you write a play?" And I'm like, "Sure, I know English. I can write a play." you know. And then you start writing, and then see, this has always been the case, and whether I did this when I was like 19, 18, or 20. After the call center, and then while advertising, and then doing theater, or when I started working with research, or when we started 1001. At every point in time, I've always gone like, yeah, sure, we can do this. And then I sat down and crapped my pants. Right? I've just been like, shit, how are we going to do this? How am I going to do this? And so the same thing happened when um, when we did theater, when I started doing theater, when they said, "Sure, I'll write the play, no big deal. Like, what is it? What is it that you want to write about?" And give me this one line, um, you know, of something that they wanted written, and they said, "Kid, can you write this play? And then I want it this long, and I'm going to do it in this place, and I have these actors, and this is what I want to do. Can you write?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." And I go back home, and I'm like, "Oh no, how am I going to do this? Like, what? And here's the thing. Um, you don't know, but you just have to figure it out. And I remember sitting down and never telling any of these people that I don't know how to do it. And then today, that's extremely really sorry, if any of them, but but I didn't know. But I sat down and I remember just fretting so much about it, but saying, okay, let's just first write it, and if it's really, it will be really bad, but let's just write it. And I remember sitting down 3 days straight and just writing something, and then going back and trying to read it again, and then shifting perspectives in my own head, trying to see it, and then and then suddenly again, Matt, I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's really how it was for me. It was, I don't know how to do this, but when you start doing it, you just know, and you know, and then after knowing, you learn, you know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how it went. And it went down to we did the play. It was well received, it was good, and then I went on to write 10 other plays. I went on to direct, and it helped me. I learned so much from, and these were not things I knew, but I'm sure I learned it from somewhere without even knowing it. I saw these plays, I saw these other plays, I heard people talking, and I'm sure that a lot of that sort of just um, you know um, I just imbibed some of that. For instance, I remember this thing, and I still remember how shocked I was when I was like, "Wow, how did I not think of this before?" And also, how did I think of this? I remember both of those sort of conflicting emotions. We were standing, and there was this scene, and there was someone who um, there was a character who was supposed to give, it was a large monologue, and you wanted that person to hold attention. He was a really good actor, but he was really short, and the person he was speaking with was really tall, and it worked. Both of them were fantastic actors, and we saw they'd auditioned. They were both brilliant, their chemistry was great, and they did the scenes great. But when we saw them on stage together, because the stage is at a height, and you're sitting down in the audience, and suddenly you see, and you're like, suddenly you can see it. You didn't see it till then in rehearsals, and then you see it, and you're like, oh no, this doesn't look good, and it looks. One is that it doesn't look aesthetic, but keep the aesthetics aside. It's not delivering what it's supposed to, right? And then you're like, what do I do now? I The tickets are booked. What are we supposed to do now? And so it's just at the moment you suddenly realize, bring the person whose monologue it is, who's a little short, let him come right to the front, let him keep walking as he's talking to the front of the stage, and let the other person sort of just be behind him, and from that perspective suddenly they look like they're the same height, right? And and then you figure, okay, how do I play with lighting, and it's I remember that all of those things happened just suddenly, and it was just these two conflicting, like, how did I not think of it before, and how did I think of this, right? And I think
There,
that's just the journey of every single thing that I've ever learned so far.
there is a bit of the behavioral scientist in that, though, right? Hindsight bias is such that, like, when you come up with a good intervention, it feels so damn obvious, right? Like, this is one of the difficulties in selling it, right? Because at times leaders will be like, well, obviously this works. And you're like, well, it wasn't obvious at the beginning. It is now obvious that we have run an experiment and it worked. And like, it has that little intuitive. So
Absolutely.
to your point, you have to live in this uncomfortable space of like, yes, a good intervention should feel obvious. It should feel natural. It should feel sort of like, like that was the answer all along, while simultaneously realizing you didn't know that at the beginning. And this is why, tracking your process helps, right? If you go look back at your ideas from the beginning, you're like, yeah, we didn't say this at the beginning. If we'd known, we would have said it. It wasn't obvious then, right? It's only obvious after
Exactly.
all of this research and all of this experimentation, for sure. And I could totally see how that plays out in the theater, right? There are lots of times in a
Right,
live
right.
production of
Absolutely. I think
anything.
the arts, the arts, film, because from there, because as a copywriter, then um, so no, so after theater, I actually started working with research and strategy, brand research and strategy, because I felt like while I was there and as I was learning to write, it was suddenly the briefs were really interesting. And then I was, see, Matt, this is exactly the same thing I was just talking about some time earlier. And it sounds confusing because I mean, not confusing. I know it sounds off. I know it sounds off to me very often when I even think about it because because today I know, then I didn't, right? But even how when I read stories about excitement or about a part or a plot in a story that talked about excitement or about setting the context for two people to fall in love, for instance, um, when I was a kid and when I was reading this stuff, um, for some reason what was happening in front of me or what I was reading was that was fine, that was okay. But it was always like, but why this? Right? Why? Because you're creating this. You can write anything. Why did you choose to write this? Right? Clearly there's something else. There's something happening in your head, and the expression of that is this scene or this plot or this whatever that might be. And that's exactly what happened when I was doing copywriting. And then I'm like, okay, I'm writing this, but why am I writing this? Why am I solving for this? Right? There seems to be something else behind it. What is that something else? And so then I went and then I started working with strategy. And to work on strategy, there were these beautiful, there were these, it's a lovely place. It's called Center of Gravity. Back then it was run by Bala and Rajesh Sahadevan. Rajesh Sahadevan still runs it in India. Um, just absolutely beautiful work, just beautiful work. And I went there and I knew nothing, and as usual. And then I landed up and straight jumped into research with them, because they'd go into really deep research and they do ethnography, and um, and then sort of break that down into brand stories and into brand direction.
But let's situate this in the timeline though, because you graduate in 2006 and you're doing theater,
Yes,
right? And then you
yes.
do become a copywriter, right? You're at Saatchi and Saatchi, you're at Lowe and Lintus, you're at Ogilvy and Mather. Like
That was later. The
that was later.
Sachi
Okay,
happened
so
later.
okay, so bring you're telling a story with no time, my friend. So you graduate,
I'm so sorry.
you're
I
no,
graduated
you're brilliant.
2006.
That's you graduate in 2006. You're doing plays. Like the center of gravity is happening when? When are you
Happened in
starting to?
2006.
Okay, so you come out and you start looking
Soon
at
after.
research and strategy. You know, you've been working while in college, but once you graduate, you're like, I want to know the why. I want to chase down some of these briefs, right? And so
Yes.
you start getting really interested in research and ethnography and going deeper and trying to understand the why behind all of these interventions that you're doing, right? You're no
Yes.
longer just poking holes in the universe, right? With your copywriting. Now you're trying to understand like why this hole, not that hole. And
Yes.
so where does that turn into then? Like, okay, and I go to like, how do you get from there to Saatchi and Saatchi?
So that was 2006 to that was 2006 up to 2007. I think there was like 1 year or just a little bit, just a little more than a year or so. At which point, um, I just yeah, because there was the inciting that was happening, and there was all of these things that were coming out of research. And again, I started missing the creative bit. um
Hmm.
this was, I mean, I just done theater. It started with writing, and now this had become really serious and adult. And I was like, hey, I mean, I miss writing the stories, but now I could see the why of the stories, right?
Hmm.
And I was young and foolish. I said I want to go back to advertising, and so I took that, and then I decided I want to go back to no, but now I'm doing advertising. I want to do it at the place where shit happens. So I'm going to go to Bombay, And I made that shift to Bombay, and that's when I went to Sachi, and then from Sachi to Lintas, and then from Lintas to Ogilvy, and that was, yeah. So that was till 2013, I think
So
2013,
so you
2014. Yeah.
so you've been copywriting in college, and then you go through this period of wanting to why, but then you want to intervene again, right? So the research is not, it's great to go deep, it's great to have this research, but you want to be back in the place where you're changing things for people, and that's what leads you back to copywriting.
Yes.
What was it
And
like to?
but I have to add here that because this time around, because I came with that, I was really lucky to work with some really cool planners in particular, at all those places. Fun fact, Anand Mani, who is a very respected behavioral scientist here in India, um, he used to be a planner at Sachi, when I was a writer there, and I've had these great, like, always lot of respect for his work, and real fun in the projects that we did work together at Sachi. So everywhere that I went after, I'd always make sure that it was not just because that was no longer satisfying. So I had to also work with the planning teams, and I managed. I genuinely just worked with really nice people who didn't feel like I was stepping on their toes or anything of that sort. And I got to work on, not just the creative part, but also sort of be part of, sort of the planning and the strategy, and understand why that was there. I had art knowledge, so I was able to work, um, with the art as well. So it was just holding everything together, um, in that time in advertising until 2013.
And were you in on? I mean, were you talking about applied? Like, was this starting to enter the vernacular, or the two of you are still just doing it without calling it while you're at Sachi?
I had no idea, Matt. I genuinely had no idea that's what it was. That's what it was called. I think that only happened, in around 2012, 2013. That is when I first started hearing about the term, and it felt like, so it was not just behavioral economics, it was not just behavioral science. There were a bunch of other things that also sort of, like, you were hearing about, there was Final Mile here that was doing some great work, right? There was Biju Dominic, who also was in Lintas in Low at who was also at some point in time, here. um, I never worked with him at the time though, but you know that these legends were around you and they were doing this, right? And they left this and they said, "Oh, I get this now, but this is not enough. There's something else happening." And so there was behavioral science, but there was also looking at psychology and something. I think it's also that it was just the right time. Advertising began to change, right? The consumer began to change. Suddenly you were not the one making interesting content, the consumer was making interesting content by themselves. You're competing with your consumer on creating content, right? All of this stuff had just about begun, and it felt like it didn't make sense anymore. It just didn't make sense that you were hoping a piece of communication was going to influence, this consumer, and then it's no longer about a consumer, it's about a user. Today I think your media, at one point in time, your medium that you reached out to people, and these they worked. Television in India was the medium that eradicated polio for some time until it's back. But they did that. Um, it was because of television, it was because of the celebrities, and that sort of, helped the movement on ground as well. But it was television as a medium, right? Today, the medium is not television, the medium is the app. The platform itself is the medium through which you touch a consumer. It's no longer media, right? I'm not saying it's no longer, that's not fair, but that's no longer enough.
It is
And
a big
as that
difference. For sure. I was writing
huge.
recently about, in the US when Nixon resigned, you could watch it live because there was three TV channels and he took over all three TV channels and that was that. Like you got, something like
Absolutely, right?
90% of the American audience could watch, right? And to do that today, right? If a president tried to resign today, he did, what is he going to take over the internet? Like, how does, like it would
Correct.
trickle
Yeah,
through a million
exactly.
places. There's no there's no live way to push an entire message. So in 2013, you're starting to see this, prolification of channels, this prolification of who's controlling the message, right? Like once upon a time as the copywriter, you kind of were the message. Now everybody else is doing all sorts of crazy things with the message, and
And
you've
they're doing it
lost.
better than you. You just have to admit it. They're doing it better than you, far cheaper than you can, and with so much less drama, right? And I think, yeah, that was a very, that was a big, that was something that just went on in the head. And on the other side, there was another thing, which was the realization that there was so much, and this is from an advertising perspective, there was so much reliance on communication to try and change someone's point of view, or to make them develop a point of view. You were hoping that I'm going to tell you and you're going to believe me, or I'm going to tell you and that much is enough. You're just going to hear me out, and I'm going to do it in a fun jingle, and I'm going to scream it at you, or I'm going to make something really funny happen to someone, and you're just going to look at that, and you're going to believe X about me. And it just felt, it didn't feel right. There was this, I know the tipping point. I know what that was, because I remember that was the day that I went. I came back and spoke to Prakash about it. I said, listen, we need to do this. We need to do something. There was this campaign for Vodafone, and Vodafone back then was much bigger in India than it is today. And it was, and they used to have enormous spends. That's what I mean when I say big. They used to have enormous spends on advertising. And there was this campaign that was done back then. It was one of the most expensive campaigns ever done in the country, for telecom. And I think they shot it in Spain or something, and it was all like this weird village carnival sort of thing. And there was all these like gypsy people, or they were showing it was a gypsy village. I think that's what they were depicting. And very pretty, very circus, very carnival. It was very that sort of stuff. Beautifully done campaign. And it had a series of different messages. It was branded. Everyone was just, everyone was just clapping. There was so much applause on, oh my god, such a beautiful campaign. And this is why it's Vodafone is such a premium brand. It looks so much better than the brands, etc., etc. And this is when you're still watching television to some extent. And then you change the channel, and on the other channel there is this character, there is this celebrity called Vidya Balan in India. And back then she was doing a campaign that was basically against open defecation, right? So she would just say, don't, essentially, don't take a dump in the open, is what she was telling you. And I'm like, oh my god, so expensive campaign, and like, oh, carnival, and let's spend like millions and millions on this and on the other. Woman's like, will you please stop taking a dump out on the road? How it's the same person, who's, it's a SIM card, it's telecom. I mean, how is this the same consumer? Who are you appealing to, right? And I understand there is a consumer you speak to and a consumer that you aspire to be. And I couldn't help, but at some point, I'm not sure the same principles. We're in a changing world. I don't think these principles apply anymore. There's something else happening, and if you want to make belief, for one, and hence because of belief, you want to change behavior. You want them to act a certain way, whether or not they even realize they're acting that way or not, or whether they take a conscious decision, whatever that might be. This is not the way to do it. And I think that's the point at which I couldn't do it anymore. I left.
And so you're trying to tell me you got to apply behavioral science through shit?
That is, yes, it is. That is true. That makes sense. I think it's an honorable entry. It's an honorable
I
entry
think it's
point.
an honorable way. Now,
The exit point is honorable entry point.
bullshit is where a lot of us start. Some of you start with bullshit, some of you start with human shit, but it's shit all the way down.
Absolutely. Should
clarify
happen.
clarify question. Is this after Ogilvy, or this is pre-Ogilvy, or where does this fit in the timeline? Do you remember when this campaign was happening?
This is during Ogilvy, 2013. This is during Ogilvy, 2013,
Right, so
2014.
you're at Ogilvy, and that's when you sort of have this epiphany that, like, hey, something different, something really different might be happening here.
Yes.
And that's when you go out on your own and start to do stuff outside
Yes.
Ogilvy.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about your first, because there is some period of time before 1001 Stories really solidifies out of that. What was working on your own like?
So, she was exactly the same, but let me put it like this. Right? It's the same. It was the same kind of jump. Shit, yeah, like I was right, man. 7 Up. It's the same. It's the same crap. But yeah. So yeah. So here's the thing, right? I knew how to because I knew advertising and I'd done it enough. I'd done it for a bunch of years now, so I knew how to do it. And this is what happens to I think I don't know. Maybe I'm sure there are people smarter than I am. But when I started out, I thought I know how to do this, so I just have to sell that, right? So um, Prakash and I started. We decided let's do this, and he had his own journey. He came to it from a completely different place. He came to it from understanding people, and I came from understanding what are those trigger points, right? Because that's where the focus for me all those years was. And we went, and I remember that we were thinking there's this um, how do you pitch to your clients and how do you tell them what to do? Like, okay, let's just start at it. We had no clue, right? None of us, we didn't come from business families. We were salaried employees for a long time in life. And so we decided we were going to do this, and we pitched to somebody, and we told them it's like, oh, so da da da, we've done these campaigns, we've done, and I spoke about the work that I had done, all these awards that you'd won, and all this work. Do you remember this work? It's so famous. Do you remember it? Like, oh my god, yes, yes, I remember it. And so great. Here's my problem. Take it, please solve this problem for me. And again, same thing. Fantastic confidence, sold it, come home, shit your pants, because you're like, oh no, hey, now I actually have this problem, how am I going to solve it? And Matt, this is something that honestly happens till date. um, the fact that um, I think it's the first time that it struck me with that first time that it happened, that till then, regardless if you did a bad job, you did a good job. Now, there was no doing a bad job because um, you you were always working with someone. You had higher ups, right? You understood a system. You understood how it worked. You knew what would go through, what wouldn't go through. So sometimes you just sort of, if you know that that's how a system must operate, you just sort of cater to the system, get it done, right? And regardless, you do your work in the system and you get your salary, you get paid. That's how life goes. And then suddenly there's someone who's given you their problem and they have a budget, and they're giving you their money, and they're saying, solve my problem, and this is not a salary. There's no higher up, there's no system to turn to. There's no one who's got there's no one who's going to take a decision on your behalf on whether this is going to work or not.
Mhm.
Suddenly the realization that this is really not about whether you know how to do what you're doing or not. This is about understanding whether you can solve that problem or not. It's not about what I know and not know. It's about, is that enough to solve that problem,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And I think that was just, it was scary. It was really scary. And that just sort of it led us to just question everything. And then suddenly I was like, okay, they gave me this brief, but maybe this is not what we're supposed to do. Is there something else? Like, why did they come with this brief? Let me figure out why this is the brief that arrived. Why is this the brief that came? What is to sales, what could be an incentive issue, to HR could be a motivation issue, to marketing can be a communication issue. What really are you solving, right? And it meant going back and understanding that, and sort of just being shit scared throughout. But again, I don't know how to write a play, let me figure it out. It was the same thing, and again, I'm lucky to get those people who allowed us to sort of do that. And then from there, you just, it worked, thank god. And then you went back and sort of just backtracked and said, how did this work? What did we do? What did we not do right? What could we have done better? What do we not know, right? And I think that was just a learning that led to finally saying, I think now we are confident to register 1001 stories and get a tax number and sort of do it because, okay, I think now we know what we're doing. Yeah, that's really how it went. It was honestly, I would be lying if I said we knew what we were doing. We thought about it, and no, it wasn't. It was more labor. It was it
Well,
was
behavioral
learning at
science,
every step.
I mean, behavioral science is that interesting bit, right? Because you don't know that it's, I mean, it is a process that arrives at the thing that works, right? It isn't a thing that works, right? It's a process that arrives at the thing that works. And it's hard to communicate sometimes to
Absolutely,
young
absolutely,
people, right? Because on the one hand, you want to say, hey, if you do this reliably, it does work, right? Science works if you do it reliably. At the same time, we're still improving this process. And so it's highly likely that we will tell you to do it differently tomorrow because we're still learning how to do science in this way, with these people.
absolutely,
I love
absolutely.
I love that you really hit the, what in the side method we call strategy, right? That like, you know, so often it's easy as a consultant to just take the brief, take the project, take the, the proposal and then take it at face value. But you really do have to interrogate. That is a huge difference between sort of the traditional Saatchi, like Lintus kind of like whatever the client says, we'll just take it and run, right? And really going
Right.
back and saying like, hey, let's get uncomfortably specific about what you want to have occur here. And there is some pushback. I think it's hard for some clients too, because they're like, why is this person arguing with me at the very
Oh my
beginning
God,
of the
all the time,
project?
all the time.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
it
right at
happens
the
all the
beginning.
time,
So,
and it
so
still happens.
you haven't like, it's not like you've established this long trust that you're going to argue at the end. You're like, right at the beginning, you're like, no, but really, let's get uncomfortable here. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
This is, I was talking to a behavioral, I was in New York this past week and I was talking to another behavioral scientist about, so much of behavioral science has been academics going this way, right? Rather than business people going that way. And I think
Absolutely.
you're a rare example of somebody who was a business person kind of going this way. And we as a field need to concentrate on this because those are going to be the good clients, right? The good clients are the ones who very traditional business people understand how business works, have done that part, and are now drifting this direction, right, to science rather than the sort of like, I know how science works. Maybe it's applicable to this business thing, you know.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think it works, and I think honestly that is the direction is backward if that's where it goes. Because honestly, that is what we've heard, and I think we do that well. We do that well now because I think every project that we begin, we start the same way, which is we shit our pants, right? We start every project with, oh my God, they're going to give us their money. We need to be able to solve this, and if that is the case, I am going to second guess why you've come to me. And I am going to go back and I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to rewind, I'm going to hit rewind, I'm going to sit with you on that table. And I want to start the conversation for like half an hour before you decided, let's call 1001, right? I want to know what happened. Why did you decide to come here? What is it that you're actually dealing with? What's the point of view of all the other stakeholders? And maybe people are not your stakeholders because you just decided they're not contributing to the budget, right? But there must be something else happening there. And and today I can say that with so much confidence that that approach works, and whoever it works because it's the honest way to do it. For one, if you really want to solve the problem, and the second thing is we've seen that because now we um I don't mean for this to sound like a brag. It's more, it's honest. It's something that happens. I love it when it happens, touch wood. But we have these clients who come in and they say that um, we've tried other things and it doesn't work, and that's why we came to you, you know? And those are the clients who are willing to go backward with you. The folks who are like, listen, I know everything. Just apply A, B, C, and tell me how you're going to test it, and tell me the timeline for your top line and your baseline, and how when you're going to finish. Just sort of tell me that. We don't do that work. We say we're not going to because we know that you're not. I'm not going to be able to show you the change that you really want. I'm not going to be able to do that for you because you're not willing to question what you want. You're not willing to question what the problem is. right? If you're so sure what the problem is, chances are you already have the answer. Because uh, honestly, there are 50 different solutions to the same problem, and any of them might work to any varying degree. But there's usually only one problem to solve. I mean, there may be 10 different problems, but you need to identify what is the problem you want to solve in the first place. And if you've hit the nail on that, then you can solve for that. But if you don't want to question the problem, then any solution works,
Yeah,
right?
there's a little
Don't
bit
do
of,
it is a good solution.
you don't want to be any client's first girlfriend, right? You want them to have been ruined by other processes and then come to you, a
Be the
shambles of a
second wife.
man, and be like,
Absolutely.
like, I'm so glad you were ruined by
That's
all of this
right.
other
Yeah.
people. Like, I actually
Yes.
have a thing for you that might work. And I think you're very right in that, sometimes people need to be a little burned before they come to applied behavioral science with the right mindset to be able to do that. And obviously we hope that someday it's not that way, right? We hope that education and other things make it easier for people to come in with the kind of learning mindset that they need to, but it does help if they're in that place
Yes.
with you. You've had such a lovely, wonderful career, right? Because you have always been willing to lean forward in things. And one of the things I think was really important out of that you brought up time and time again, I talk to young people all the time who are like, well, I just need to do one more class or one more this or one more that, and then I'll be ready to be an applied behavioral science. I'm like, no, just start now.
I've heard them.
Right? Like, I teach the classes and I will tell you, just start now. Right? Like,
Absolutely.
you gotta fail forward a bunch. What is a maybe that's a great place for us to end. What is a recent fail forward for you? What have you changed recently in how you do applied behavioral science because of a failure? I know it's those tough
Um,
questions.
it is thinking. What have we changed?
See, this is why I have a
I
podcast where I don't give people the questions in advance. You can't prepare. You just have to give me the raw thing. What's the last thing in your
absolutely no,
process that
and
you changed?
that's right. Yeah, I think I don't know if I can answer this question. Yeah, and I don't think it needs it to be tied to behavioral science. It's the way you deal with failure in any project or anything that you're doing, a problem that you're trying to solve. And if we've seen that something, I think it's see we always talk about looking back at context and going back to what is that problem. I mean, that's the reason we started going back to the problem, because you've done something, you've been told, for instance, that this is what the problem is and we want you to solve it. And you may have you there's some pushback if you question too much, like, no, this is what we want to solve. And then again, you realize it takes a bunch of years to realize that, oh, the reason that they want to solve this problem is because this problem is in the purview of this department, right? Like, HR can deal with motivation. They can't do that's where they believe they can add value, and then so they don't want to work on whatever else. But that may not be the problem at all, right? The problem may be something else altogether. The problem may be completely misunderstood. Possibly for instance, the sales team may believe that they need to sell more of the lower priced items because they sell easier, and they believe, look, I'm selling so much, what's the problem? Because the higher price items are actually what they want sold, and that's not a motivation issue, right? It's what do they understand of the job in the first place, and how are they looking at the entire thing? What are they believing they are bundling? It's a bunch of different things. And for me, if I go back to the question, I think my biggest learning has been that it is so context dependent. um, Even the biases that I'm looking at, if I have to look at them, and honestly, the biases come later. First, it's just the understanding of what is happening on ground. What is that context? And just keeping our eye on the context we have learned that just keeping your eye on the context first and then labeling anything else after, it has helped us know truly what to solve for and whom to solve for and what is not worth solving at all.
I mean, that's a
Right?
super important one. Hey, I'm not trying to change that behavior. That's not in scope. That's not part of this. Like, it's an important behavior, but it might not be the one we're going to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's end on this. All right. So somewhere in the world is a 10-year-old Reshma now who thinks she wants to be an applied behavioral scientist. She's not a writer. She's not a drama. It's not copywriting. She thinks she wants to be an applied behavioral scientist. What is your advice for the 10-year-old Reshma of today, right? That's looking forward, that, is looking at her Auntie Reshma and saying, I want to be that. What would you tell her?
This is just Reshma, right? This is not this is not any other kid. This is Reshma.
It doesn't have to be any other kid. This is just 10-year-old current Reshma.
I think, Matt, I'd be terrible at whatever it is that I do today. Whatever I'm half decent at doing today, I'd be terrible at it had I not done whatever it is that I was doing so far. Being at a call center taught me what's happening for the call center executive. Forget about the customer, right? Doing theater taught me how to feel an emotion so that I could plant it on stage. Right? Writing films for creative taught me that sometimes you don't have to change the voiceover artist. You possibly just have to change the music, and that put a crescendo. The guy's not talking well enough, or he's not giving you that power and that impact. Put in the music, right? A crescendo there, and that will work well enough. Being on ground, living in farmers' homes, visiting tribal villages, sitting in consumers' homes, listening to them, talking to them. It's all of those things that have taught me and showed me everything that I'm talking to you about today. So if I had to speak to 10-year-old Reshma, I'd say, do theater, join a call center. I tell her, write your engineering exam, but take this route so that you pass this college. And yeah, I think the biggest advice I tell you is just don't tell dad.
Don't tell dad. This is definitely, as a dad, this is going to be the highlight of the episode for me, is don't tell dad. I'm not going to lie. One of the things we see after so many episodes is that there are themes to the people who end up in applied behavioral science. And, I know you know this, that I ended up in Hong Kong. I did not tell my parents before I applied. So, you get what you get.
That's a theme. That's the only advice anyone needs. Don't tell dad.
Don't tell dad. All right. Well, Reshma, thanks so much for taking some time with me today. It's always fun to talk to you. Appreciate you sharing your journey with us, and look forward to see you on down the road. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
It's always fun to talk with you. And I'll see you guys. I think I'll be in India more soon. Details TBD.
Lovely. Fantastic.
But stay tuned, and I'll see you on down the road. Bye, Reshma.
Lovely. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.